Hey everybody, welcome to the monster building stream, the monster design stream. I'm not quite sure what to call it. It's kind of an impromptu thing, but I just wanted to hop on and do a little bit more streaming this week. It's also kind of a random time. We used to do adventure prep at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, 2 p.m. PST. But I never tried streaming like this on a Thursday before, so this may be the time. This may not be the time. We'll see. How's everybody doing? Thanks for coming. I'm just making sure everything looks okay. Design one monster from the 5th edition monster manual. It is kind of partnered with a podcast that I do, which you haven't checked it out. Please do. It's called Monster of the Week. You should see the thing right above you. I'm sorry work was so bad, Castle Red Fox. Yeah, thanks for coming out, Vaughn. Thanks for being here, Castle Red Fox. Lovely to have you. I'm sorry work was bad. That's an absolute nightmare. I hate it. It's day jobs can be soul sucking. Sure, monster is a loaded term. You're exactly right. I like the term monster, but I think there are some monsters in D&D that you could make that case that, like, is it really fair to call him a monster? You know, like who's the real monster here? But it is a podcast that I run. It was on a brief hiatus, and now it's just coming back. We have some new episodes recorded. I actually just recorded an episode with a special guest, like 15 minutes ago. So that was awesome, and I'm excited to release that episode. I think that's 2 episodes from now. You'll hear that one about a very famous D&D monster. But that is not what we are talking about today. Today we are talking about the Banshee. So we just had an episode that released on Sunday that kind of did a deep dive on the Banshee and how it's presented in D&D and kind of taking an analytical look at it. Oh no, you're lagging? Let me know, Vaughn, if I'm lagging on that end. It seems fine to me here, but I'm still, like, this is only the second time I've streamed from my new apartment, so the internet might not be up to the task. How does it look, Vaughn? Please let me know. I'll keep going, but if there's lag, please stop me. Great. So, yeah, we did an episode of Monster of the Week where we did a deep dive on the Banshee, and what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of synthesize those notes that we took and see if we can kind of design a better, more interesting monster while keeping the core concept the same, and then just making a few tweaks, a few improvements to kind of homebrew a new version of the Banshee. Great. So let's break down, first of all, what a Banshee is. A Banshee, as you can see here by the stat block, is a CR4 medium undead. You had some lag, but it passed? Okay. Hopefully it should be good now. My computer doesn't like it when I have the stream up. It doesn't like me watching myself, so I'll minimize it and hopefully it'll be okay. Great, as long as we're good. It's a CR4 undead. It's got a bunch of resistances. It's got detect life, which allows it to magically sense the presence of creatures up to 5 miles away. It's got incorporeal movement, so it can move, through solid objects. And it has 3 different actions. It has Corrupting Touch, Horrifying Visage, and Wail. Corrupting Touch deals necrotic. Horrifying Visage basically lets her frighten people by showing them her horrifying face. And then she's got a Wail that she can do once per day. And that's kind of how it works. Story-wise, they are, in 5th edition, presented as sort of the ghosts, the unquiet spirits of specifically female elves who were beautiful, but used their beauty for evil. And so they are, like, bound to the place where they died, and they are, full of jealousy and rage at the living. So kind of a corner case monster, and that's actually my first beef. We're going to talk about the 3 kind of big issues I had with the Banshee, and we'll talk a little bit about some solutions on how we can make... Oh, I didn't even finish this. Hedonists who what? Well, we'll cover that in just a second. So my first problem with the Banshee as it's written in 5th edition is with the lore. I talked about this in the podcast episode, but just to recap really quick, the idea behind it is that, like... I have 2 problems with it. It feels too corner case in the sense of, like, if the only way to make a Banshee is to have a female elf who was beautiful but then died and is now, like, jealous and, like, who used her beauty in, like, evil ways, it's just, like, not only is it hard to believe there would be more than, like, 1 or 2 elves, right? And hard to believe there would be more than 1 or 2 elves. that would ever do that. There would be maybe one or two Banshees in the entire history of the world that meet all of those qualifications, right? And then secondly, it's also kind of a little bit yucky and feels sort of sexist that like this idea of like, how does a beautiful person use their beauty for good and not for evil? Like, I don't know. Like, it just feels like it's all wrapped up in this weird kind of grognard, like, you know, girls who didn't have sex with me in college thing. So I want to rewrite the lore and make it a little bit more. There are things about it I like. I like their obsession with like luxury and beauty and the finer things, right? And so I like the idea of them that still being a big part of the Banshee. But I want to rewrite the lore in a different way to make them feel a little bit more consistent in their theme. Vaughn says, the best worst Banshee encounter I had was in Dragon of Icespire Peak. Our cleric cast Silence, and that was that, Quiet Rage. Yeah, best worst is a good description of that because, like, that's the weird thing about Silence, right? It's one of those spells that is really, really conditional. If the cleric thinks to bring it, right, then I think it's you should reward them for having it, but it does like completely suck the air out of the room in a Banshee encounter. So hopefully this version of the Banshee might be able to withstand a silent spell a little bit better. Great. So that's my first problem, and we'll talk about my idea of what we want to do there in just a minute. My second problem is that I think the Banshee as written has too many resistances. If you look, you can see it is resistant to acid, fire, lightning, thunder, bludgeoning, acid, fire, lightning, thunder, and then also bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. It's also immune, like straight up immune to cold, necrotic, and poison. Pretty standard for undead. But then it's also got a huge pile of condition immunities because it's incorporeal. Charmed, exhaustion, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, and restrained. So it's like, there's only a handful of things you can do, assuming that you don't have a magic weapon, which CR4, chances are good you probably don't, or not everybody in the party does. You know, you can't hit it with acid or fire or lightning or thunder or cold or necrotic or poison. That leaves what, like force damage? Radiant obviously is the big one, which I think is you know, kind of the go-to. But I feel like the solution to this problem, I've had like a high horse about resistances. I think too many monsters in D&D have resistances. Hey Grant, what's up? Thanks for coming. Yeah, I don't really understand the fire, lightning, or thunder immunity, frankly. You know, or resistance, yeah. Like, what is that about? Like, there are plenty of incorporeal undead that don't have those resistances. Like, what are they really so afraid of? But I don't think the answer necessarily is to, like, scrape away all of those resistances. You certainly could take some of them out. But I feel like what's more interesting is to give the Banshee a bigger kind of fatal flaw, like a weakness that you could play into. So we'll talk about that in a little bit as to exactly what that would be. But it's less of a mechanical thing and more of a story weakness, which I think is always going to be more interesting. And then lastly, my third problem with the Banshee is that it has two other abilities. I love the Wail. I think Wail as written is pretty great. I would maybe push the maybe add like a radius thing, because there's a whole I guess that's true. It's thunder damage. Grant makes the point that he gets thunder because they're loud. Yeah, it's closer. Acid does feel kind of arbitrary. The only thing I would maybe fix with Wail would be to, like, I like the idea of like ripple effects. So it's like if you're within 30 feet, it's this bad. If you're within 60 feet, it's this bad, because I feel like a scream would carry a lot farther. But I find both Corrupting Touch and Horrifying Visage are a little dull, and I would kind of like to go in and tailor them to our theme. So we'll talk about how to do that in a little bit, but kind of unlike other monsters that I've redesigned, the Banshee is getting kind of a thematic rewrite as well, which hopefully will kind of trickle out into all the different areas. So my thinking with the Banshee on theme is that I don't like the idea, as Vaughn describes it, it's like a Disney villain lore, right? It does feel very Maleficent, which isn't necessarily bad, but I don't like the kind of gendered angle that they take with it. So a couple of things off the bat, I would say Banshees can be of any ancestry, right? They don't have to be elves. Maybe like the original lore or myths came from the elves because it happened more often among their people. But I think you should be able to have a Banshee out of any humanoid, right? So a dwarven Banshee, a human Banshee, that kind of a thing. I wouldn't tie it just to elves necessarily. I would also then say that it's not about their like beauty so much as it is about their lifestyle. The big inspiration for me and the Banshee right now is Dorian Gray, or the picture of Dorian Gray, portrait of Dorian Gray, the Oscar Wilde story. I think it's like the only novel he wrote. For those of you unfamiliar, it is a gothic novel about a man who is seemingly immortal and who is immune to disease and to all manner of afflictions that are kind of plaguing the lower classes, I think, of London. I haven't read Dorian Gray in years. Maybe it's set in Ireland. But the big reveal is that he has this connection to this painting, and that every time a sickness or an injury or whatever would happen to his body, it is instead transferred to this painting. And so that allows him to live forever and do all these things. Then eventually, but the rule is that he can never look at the painting. If he looks at the painting, then all of those things happen to him at once, and he ages instantly and dies. And so it's kind of like a screed on like hedonism, right? And living in excess and luxury and all that stuff. And that really resonated to me with the Banshee. The idea of someone who lives like a comfortable, sheltered life where they are pampered and everything is given to them and they never want for anything. And they're constantly kind of like lusting after luxuries. So it's a little bit of Dorian Gray. I think it's even a little bit of like Scrooge. I like the idea of someone who dies, alone and sad that way, like kind of holding on to their earthly possessions, can become a Banshee. What's cool about that is that it makes sense why they would be tied to the location where they died. They could presumably be murdered, but I like the idea that in most cases they'd sort of die of old age, right? And almost like that third act in A Christmas Carol where, I think it's actually the fourth act, where Scrooge has to like see his future, right? Like the Banshee is forced to watch as all of its possessions are sold and it's like estate crumbles into ruin and everything that it valued like deteriorates, but it's trapped here watching all of its early possessions go away. Vaughn's got some hits here. My second best encounter was in a homebrew version of Lost Mines. Okay, in that game I changed the lore of the Banshee to have her memory reset every day. Ooh, that's cool. She was a noble who extended her life from others. Yeah, kind of a Duchess Bathory. A duchess who bathed in blood, but not for beauty, but for extended life. Yeah, that's another classic. Like, I think they're like at least one hag in Curse of Strahd does that. So that's a great reflavor on the Banshee. That's what I mean. I feel like you have to just kind of burn it down and start over. So I like the idea of them being these like sort of who clung to luxury in life. That like if you lead one of these lives, I don't think I want to put like a stricture on why they like how they die, I think I like the idea that they could turn into a Banshee just from leading that life. It's more about the life you lead than the death you necessarily suffer. So in doing that, I think what that does is it kind of like rewrites a lot of the Banshee's mechanics and abilities. We keep, I think, a lot of them in spirit or in theme, but we can kind of play with them a little bit. So in terms of resistances, then, let's talk about problem number 2. I think what that does downstream of changing them into being these kind of like desperate, clinging hedonists is that you can give them like literally the Dorian Gray weakness, which is resistance. Resistance. Give them the Dorian Gray weakness. I'm looking at the word resistance and I said it, which is their own image. So during the podcast, I was talking about the idea of like a reflection thing, kind of like a Medusa, but having a few weeks really to think about it made me realize like I think it's actually cooler if it is properly Dorian Gray, like an image of them in life. Right, because the notion being like how far they've come from who they used to be to who they are now, right? Like you could emphasize a Banshee's like decrepit sort of ugliness. They used to value, beauty and appearance and vanity, and now like any glimpse of them, who they used to be, like in the book they talk about that like sending them into a rage, but I love the idea that that is actually sort of the kryptonite to a Banshee, is their own image. And that maybe it doesn't outright destroy them, but it has some, like, it's kind of like the key towards winning the Banshee fight. Why I like that is because I like the idea of if the party knows they have to go up against a Banshee, they can do some interesting preparation where, they have to like locate an image of this person. And presumably if you were a Banshee, you were wealthy enough to, have your portrait taken and things like that. So there would probably be images of this Banshee in existence. But if they're within 5 miles of the Banshee's lair, I imagine the Banshee would have tried to destroy it, right? Or rend it. So like I love the idea of going into a Banshee's like lair and kind of Beauty and the Beast style, seeing like all the paintings are torn up and destroyed or burned or whatever, right? That the Banshee has tried to destroy its own image out of hatred, and like, you know, fear and jealousy of what it used to look like. So there's a lot of different, like, it's very narrative, which I think is kind of cool that you sort of have to do it outside the bonds of combat. But if you come in with it, kind of like Vaughn was saying with Silence, I like the notion that it's sort of a game ender, right? If you have that effect, if you have it, then you were able to wield it at the Banshee. You have to get the Banshee to look at it, and you have to be able to like keep it, you know, carry it with you the entire way. But it can kind of like, you know, short circuit the encounter. Because I feel like if you do that, if you engage with it on that level, not only are you playing into the Banshee's story, but you've also probably done a bunch of yeah, exactly. Vaughn says it also makes for a good side quest. That's precisely what I'm thinking. Acquiring a portrait or finding somebody who knew the Banshee in life and who can like draw them, right? Like there's a bunch of ways I think you could go about it. You know, like a flashback thing or like a memory, accessing someone's memory or dream of this person. I feel like there could be a lot of creative, interesting ways to get an image of them that isn't a reflection. Yeah, so what form the weakness takes, I'm not exactly sure. I kind of like Vaughn's idea of making them vulnerable, like while the Banshee can see the portrait, right? It has vulnerability to you know, radiant or like it becomes corporeal again or something like that, so it loses a lot of its resistances. I think that's cool. I want it to be kind of an encounter ender, but I also think it's neat if it doesn't. Like, if, from a logistical standpoint, if the Banshee had to destroy the other portraits, looking at it can't destroy it, right? Because it would have had to have looked at the other portraits around it in its, you know, manor house or castle or wherever you find it. And obviously, you know, you could find Banshees in places where there aren't portraits around, right? Like, if a Banshee is... If a vain person is sailing, you know, and then their ship sinks, there presumably aren't a lot of portraits of them on their vessel. But, you know, you understand. And then lastly, again, if we're going downstream of this like vanity and kind of beauty theme, I wanted to talk about the other two abilities. So Corrupting Touch and Horrifying Visage, as currently written, Corrupting Touch is just raw necrotic damage. And then Horrifying Visage, yeah, exactly. Vaughn says I'm all for boosting the often ignored exploration tier of the game. Totally. Horrifying Visage is a frightening effect. And again, it's something I cover in the podcast, but I find, well, Corrupting Touch is pretty normal and fine. Like, not necessarily a bad power, a pretty standard, you know, deal a little bit of damage, basic attack. Horrifying Visage is really cool in flavor, that it shows you its like actual, true, horrible, rotten face. Great, perfect for what we need for Dorian Gray, right? But I think the effect of it, fear, I think is a little bit underwhelming. I think there are too many monsters in 5th edition that rely on fear. I think I'm never a big fan of any ability that like out and out tells a player character like this is the emotion you're having. You know, you can go kind of supernatural with it, but my thinking is that like it is much stronger if like that ability is rarer and found with fewer monsters. So my instinct would be to swap it out for something else. The only thing that comes to mind, and I'm open to another suggestion if somebody has one, but the ghost in 5th edition. Let me pull up my monster manual here. I forget exactly how many it reads. Yeah, thank you, David, and welcome. Far too many fear effects. I completely agree. Look at all these people here. I was worried nobody would show up today. It's awesome to have all these lovely patrons in the chat, patrons and fans. Okay, let me see for the ghost. Yeah, I agree, David. Way too many fear effects. And fear is also like a pretty boring mechanic. Ooh, yeah, the portrait sculpture could be a phylactery. A sculpture is awesome too. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, like a bust. So there's like shattered busts around. Oh, dude, that's beautiful. I hadn't even considered the idea of a sculpture. Great. So, ironically, the ghost also has Horrifying Visage. But it says, it frightens them. And it says, if the save fails by 5 or more, the target also ages 1d4 times 10 years. Now that I love, right? Because what's cool about that is that there's no mechanical effect of it, right? But it is a huge narrative thing, and it's also like interestingly weighted because like it would be very deadly to a creature like a human or a halfling, but not as effective against an elf. And I kind of think that's an interesting mechanic. You might want to put a little bit more oomph under it if it's just aging, but I really like that as a thing. Maybe we make the horrifying visage less of an action and more of a almost like a gaze attack, right? Like if you look at the Banshee, then you have to do this or you age, right? So that way it's like it's consistently happening over and over and over again. We can maybe reduce the amount. It could be 1d4 times 5 or something like that. Yeah, I was gonna say Aarakocra was the one I was thinking of. Grant. Yeah, absolutely. Because like they live very, very short lives. The orcs in my homebrew setting also live like they live for like a decade. So like that could be like 100% an orc killer for sure. But that's a really cool power. It's also in my homebrew world, aging is really associated with the undead. And so I love the idea of coupling those two things. So I would maybe take, upon saying this, I would maybe take Horrifying Visage out of actions and put it into traits that like it doesn't show itself to you. It's just like if you look at the Banshee, then you have to make this saving throw, right? And it's like Medusa where you could avert your gaze if you want, which again I think would make it a little bit scarier of a monster as well. So yeah, those are the, and then Corrupting Touch. So there was a previous version of the Banshee, I think it's in 3rd edition, that has a similar effect where it touches you, but it drained your charisma, which in 3rd edition was kind of a pain in the butt, but like 5th edition does have at least one draining power, and that's the Shadow that has Strength Drain. So I actually kind of like the idea of taking that and putting it here. I don't know that the way the Strength Drain works for the Shadow, it's 2d6 plus 2 necrotic damage, so I think it would still deal necrotic damage, and the target's strength score is reduced by 1d4. So I think you would do a similar thing, right? The target's charisma score is reduced by 1d4. The Shadow says the target dies if this reduces its strength to 0. Otherwise, the reduction lasts until the target finishes a short or long rest. And it says if a non-evil humanoid dies from this attack, a new Shadow rises from the corpse 1d4 hours later. Yeah, so I kind of think I like the idea of that, of 1d4. I like the idea of like it representing like, I don't know if it kills you, because the Banshee is already pretty deadly with that whale, right? But I like the idea of the Banshee, if it drains you to 0 hit points, or sorry, 0 hit points, if it drains you to 0 charisma, that like the, I don't know how you would mechanize this, but the Banshee like returns to life, right, for a day or whatever. Yeah, Intellect Devour is another great example. And we could draw on the Intellect Devour. It has a slightly different mechanic, but I kind of like the drain, that it's like slowly taking it away from you. I don't know how you would mechanize that, but narratively, I love the idea that what the Banshee really wants, what it's trying to do, is to steal your vitality, your charisma, right? So that way it can be beautiful and like charismatic and magnetic again, right? That to me is like the core nugget of the Banshee. And so by making Corrupting Touch be a charisma drain attack, I think that sort of plays into that. I don't know how you would mechanize that. I think you might even just write it in here like that. Like if the Banshee reduces a creature to 0, you know, that they become a living humanoid or whatever. And then just kind of leave it up to the party to decide, like, what does that mean? Yeah, the target dies and the Banshee, like, you know, becomes a living humanoid. Ooh, Roll in the Madness table is... Ooh, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know what happens in 5th edition if you reduce to 0 charisma. That's a great question. So those are the changes I would like to make. I think otherwise we can keep most of this stuff in there. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to jump over. Let me check and make sure that this my framing is still good. Okay, I want to scoot this way a little bit. We're going to jump over here to the stat block generator. This is... Let me just adjust a little bit. Yeah, that's fine. This is a website called tetracube.com. that I have used in the past. I'll try to minimize here. I'm sure I'm getting a little bit of lag. That I've used in the past, and I really, really like it for monster design. It basically lets you kit bash your own monster stat blocks, and it also has a huge list of presets for monsters, both in the SRD and in, I think, like a Kobold press. Yeah, the Tome of Beasts. There's a bunch of monsters in here from there. Then you can like preload them in. So I have preloaded the Banshee, which I don't think is technically in the SRD, but and we're gonna go through here and we're gonna make the necessary changes to make our version of the Banshee. So let's see. I think the nice thing is that I think most of the nuts and bolts of the Banshee, like its armor class and its hit points and stuff like that, can more or less stay the same. I think we can keep its resistances, you know, as they are, because we're gonna add oh, where's my water? You know what? I might get my water quick because I can feel it. There it is. Feel my throat getting a little bit scratchy. I will be back in like 10 seconds. One moment. There we go. Awesome. I'm back. I just had to like, my microphone is so old. I really need a new one. Okay, but what I was saying was that I think we can keep most of the mechanics, like of the base block of its like saving throws and ability scores, like all of that can basically stay the same. But then I might want to. Ooh, you know what though? What if we reduce? Yeah, you know what? I think its charisma is fine. I was thinking maybe it has really low charisma, and then it's trying to get its charisma back if we're giving it a charisma drain. But I don't think we need to worry too much about that, because then you're having to like adjust its charisma on the fly, and like I think let's just leave it. The only thing I would change in this like first section, like before we get to the traits, is I would change the languages. So I forget how like the Ghost frames it. I think the Ghost says like any languages it knew in life. So let's see. Let me look. The Ghost. And like they're intelligent, right? You could talk to a Banshee. They have 12 intelligence. Ghost. That moment when you forget how the alphabet works when you're searching for something and you're like, does O come before or after H? Yeah. Ghost has any languages it knew in life. So it speaks other. It speaks any languages it knew in life is, I believe, how it's phrased here. Yeah, which I think is fine. Speaks. Great. So then you just update the stat block and it appears over there. It's a great. I love this website. I use this website all the time. Okay, so detect life we're going to leave as is. Incorporeal movement we're going to leave as is, but we are going to move horrifying visage over to traits. Let me just make sure you guys can see everything that I have here. Yeah, okay, great. Just checking. Because I have to have my OBS minimized. It's hard for me to know what the framing is on some of this stuff. So I want to look up the Medusa's wording for this, because the Medusa has that sort of gaze attack thing, and that's what I would like to do with the Banshee. So Medusa, here we go. The problem with this is that, like, I do think, like, bloat is for sure an issue with these redesigns, so I want to try to keep it as light as possible. So what we have here for horrifying visage. When a creature that can see the Medusa's eyes starts its turn within 30 feet of the Medusa. When a creature that can see the Banshee's face starts its turn within, I think 30 feet is fine, within 30 feet of the Banshee, the Banshee can force it to make a DC. What is our DC here? DC 13 Wisdom saving throw. Because I don't want to necessarily move the CR if we don't have to. We probably will if we're empowering it in this way. But if the Banshee isn't incapacitated, I mean, yeah, I don't know if they really can be incapacitated. And can see the creature. I actually don't think it's important for the Banshee to be able to see the creature. I think you just could look at it and have that happen. Let's see. If the saving throw fails by 5 or more, the creature is instantly petrified. On a so let's go back to the ghost now, because I think it's actually relatively simple in terms of its, and I like it being like a repeated problem. You know, that like you look at it and you age a little bit. You know, if you're an elf, who cares? But if you're a human and you age 10 years, like that's kind of a big deal. So I think we'll reduce the amount. I think we'll go like 1d4 times 5 or something like that. So that way it's like 5, 10, whatever. And they can see that like over the course of a Banshee encounter, you will probably age a couple of times. If the save on a failure, target ages 1d4 times 5 years. There we go, times 5 years. So the ghost has a thing where if you succeed on the saving throw, you're immune to the horrifying visage for the next 24 hours. But that seems like the opposite of what you want for the Medusa, right? So like I think we'll scrap that as well, and we'll keep it more Medusa than ghost in that case. We could add a, like, if the save fails by 5 or more, you age 1d4 times 10 years, but I think the stat block is already going to be chunky enough, and that's not that interesting of a change, so I think we'll leave it. Let's see. Then I think we go unless surprised. And I like that there's, like, no other mechanical effect, right? Like, you just age, and it's kind of up to... No, I don't think so, David. Yeah, we were just talking about that, right? I think it's repeatedly. If it was, then I would. If it was once per 24 hours, I would definitely do a make the age go up, because like aging doesn't have any real mechanical effect, you know. So I think it's only dangerous if it's done enough to the point where it's like, oh god, I might get so old I can't function. A creature can avert its eyes. Oop. Creature can avert its eyes to avoid the saving throw. Saving throw at the start of its turn. If the creature does so, it can't see the Banshee until the start. The start of its next turn, when it can avert its eyes again. If the creature looks at the Banshee in the meantime, it must immediately make the save. If the creature looks at the Banshee, hey, what's up, Shadowrunner? I was just thinking about that, about the age debilitation chart. Like, whether it's worth saying, like, if a creature is reduced to this, but again, because of elves and because of how people live in their world, like, I kind of just like it as flavor, honestly. Like, you know, if you do have an Aarakocra or, like, a homebrew orc like I do, then, you know, maybe that's a conversation to be had. But it could also just be, like, that you're supernaturally aged and it doesn't kill you, right? That, like, you just look like you're 1,000 years old, you know, and that's that. Which I think is kind of cool. It looks at the Banshee in the meantime, it must immediately make the save. So I want to go back because there is a reference to in the ghost of how you would get rid of it. Because we could even like write in that like a creature cannot die from this effect. Ooh, the aging effect can be reversed with the Great Restoration, but only within 24 hours of occurring. A creature cannot die of old age from this effect. Cannot die of old age from this effect, but it can only be reversed with a greater restoration spell cast within 24 hours of the effect occurring, Okay. Great. So let me add that. Oh, is that how I spell occurring? 2 R's. Let me add that ability, and then we can delete the old one. And I think alphabetically we would need to move Horrifying Visage up. Yeah, so that way it's above Incorporeal Movement. Okay, let me read it. When a creature that can see the Banshee's face starts its turn within 30 feet of the Banshee can force it to make a DC 13 Wisdom saving throw if the Banshee isn't incapacitated. On a failure, the target ages 1d4 times 5 years. A creature cannot die of old age from this effect, but it can only be reversed. But the effect can only be reversed. Yeah, there should be an but the effect. But the effect can only be reversed with a greater restoration spell. Oh, that should be italicized. I think it's like that in this. Cast within 24 hours of it occurring. Unless surprised, a creature can avert its eyes to avoid the saving throw at the start of its turn. If a creature does so, it can't see the Banshee until the start of its next turn when it can avert its eyes again. If the creature looks at the Banshee in the meantime, it must immediately make the save. Yeah, I think that works. Vaughn says, how about a combination effect where the fear caused by the Visage alters the whale? Ooh. Yeah, I don't love the fear, but I do like the idea of those two, like, ooh. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Vaughn says you can mechanically model aging as a reduction of maximum hit points. Every year lost is a maximum hit point lost. That would allow aging to death. I don't hate that. I kind of like it just being mechanical, but like, or just being flavor, but like that might be the way to mechanize it actually. Okay, so let's maybe go in and put that. For each year lost. Well, it's tricky though, because is it kind of a double? Well, I suppose the whale doesn't deal damage otherwise, right? Yeah, so let's do want to do for each year I wonder if you would actually reverse it, if you would say on a failure the target like hit point maximum is reduced by 1d4 times 5. The target, is it target or creature? I forget. It's a target. The target also ages. No, I think you'd flip it. I think the way it was before is better wording. The target ages 1d4 times 5 years, and its hit point maximum is reduced by 1 point per year that it ages. Per year that it ages. I like that one. I like the idea of it being the whale or the Visage, right? Because it's a nice way to, the creature dies if its hit point maximum reaches 0. Yeah, that's great. I want to see how the white phrases that, because I know the white has like a life drain. But yeah, I think that's a good way to do that aging effect. So what's cool is that then like elves and dwarves are less susceptible to that. Oh, yeah, that's your problem, actually. That's why that doesn't work, because elves and dwarves, right? Like, you wouldn't... Yeah, that doesn't work for them. Shoot. It's a cool effect, but yeah, I think we might have to go back to the old way. Shoot. That's a bummer. Yeah, I think the whale's already pretty too powerful. I don't think it's OP, but yeah, I don't want to beef up the whale. I think the whale's good as it is. So let's keep this as is. I like that idea, Vaughn, but I think because there's no way to model that for a character that lives longer, I think we're just gonna keep it as just a flavor thing. Okay, cool idea though. I'm for it. I just if you could somehow guarantee your entire party were like halflings and humans and tieflings and stuff, but you really can't. Okay, so that's Horrifying Visage. Incorporeal Movement, I think, is fine. Let me go back and check our thing here. Oh yeah, we wanted to do the image. So I don't know what to call the power, right? But it's like if the Banshee looks at its own image, a painting, a sketch, a bust, a sketch, or a sculpture, So what do we decide? Like, I like the idea that it loses resistances. I also like the idea that I like the idea more that it gains a vulnerability, right? Maybe it loses its resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and it gains a vulnerability to radiant or something. That, like, I really want it to be like a huge detriment, right? That should be like almost an encounter winning moment. It's cool if it doesn't kill it outright, but I think it should be pretty deadly to the Banshee. I like it being bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing because I think that's the big hurdle for a lower level party. It loses its resistances to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons, and gains vulnerability to radiant damage. I like the idea. This might be a little bit more than we necessarily need to do, but I do like the idea of putting in, unless surprised, the Banshee can avert its eyes, right? To avoid looking at... Well, I guess maybe we should make it a saving throw, right? Because... yeah, I think we'll make it a saving throw. If the Banshee looks at its own image... That's true. You could just say that. It must make a DC 13 Wisdom saving throw. Wisdom saving throw. On a failure, the Banshee loses its resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magic weapons and gains vulnerability to radiant damage. Unless surprised, the Banshee can avert its eyes to avoid looking at the... to avoid looking at the image at the start of its turn. If the Banshee does so, it can't see. Yeah, That's where that kind of breaks down, right? So maybe we just remove it. Maybe we just say it can't look away, right? It's like compelled to look at it if it sees it. I need a cool name for this, like self-image or whatever. I actually don't hate self-image, but there's probably a better name that's a little bit more flavorful. Yeah. Cool. Oh, yeah. So I gotta keep it like that for now. Okay, we could cheat a little bit. We could put incorporeal movement up and then scoot it over. Yeah, great. Okay, so that's that, right? That's its weakness. It's horrifying visage, and then we've got its 2 actions. Yeah, we're close. This might not take that long. I mean, we could write some flavor, maybe. I wasn't sure if we would have time, or if that would be like interesting to watch as I write the flavor. But let's do the corrupting touch. Yeah, is that the last thing then? I think so. So it's dex attack to hit. Reach 5 feet, 1 target, hits for 3d6. So I'm going to reduce the amount. I think we're going to bring this down to 2d6 because we are going to put in that, which is roughly the same amount of damage the shadow deals. But okay, shadow. And the target's charisma score is reduced. And the target's charisma score is reduced by 1d4. Yeah, cool. The target... Ooh, self-loathing is pretty good, yeah. I might just call it loathing. Yeah, that's cool. The target... the target... Because it says the target dies, it reduces the strength to 0. I don't want them to die. I think if they... I like the long-term madness, but I do think it has to, like, take them out of the fight, essentially, right? The target is incapacitated. A creature with 0 charisma is incapacitated. With 0 charisma is incapacitated and rolls on. So I forget with these tables which one of the madnesses do we think this should be. I don't know the tables as well as I maybe should. Random madness 5e. Rolls on the madness table. So there's the short-term madness, which are like kind of mechanical things. Long-term madness. I kind of like the long-term madnesses better, right? Like you lose your 1d10 times 10 hours. Yeah, let's do long-term madness. Yeah, I think that's cool. Ooh, yeah. Is incapacitated with despair. With despair. And rolls on the long-term madness table. And rolls once on the long-term madness table. Nobody here in this chat knows anything about the long-term madness table, do they? Nobody does. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Long-term madness table. A Banshee that reduces a creature, or a humanoid. Yeah. A humanoid to 0 charisma becomes a living humanoid for 24 hours. Yeah, and just like leave it at that and like keep it kind of vague. Like you could definitely like make that this is mechanically what happens, right? But I like the idea of +2. Still a question mark in there for some weird reason. Yeah, necrotic damage. Okay. I like the idea that it's just like a weird, mysterious thing, you know? Yeah, and then the whale. Oh, we wanted to extend the whale. So we wanted to do a thing where it's like, I always thought it was weird that it was only 30 feet. And it is still pretty powerful. So this maybe isn't is going against the thing that I said earlier about keeping the whale where it's at. Okay. So let's do releases a mournful wail provided she isn't in sunlight. The wail has no effect on constructs and undead. All other creatures within 60 feet of her that can hear her must make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw. Creatures within on a failure. Yeah, so let's do this. So all creatures within 60 feet of her. Within 60 feet of her that can hear her must make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw. On a failure, creatures within 30 feet of her yeah, how do you word it if it's like waves? So it's like creatures within 30 feet of her are reduced to half their hit points, while creatures within so creatures within 60 feet of her are reduced to creatures more than 30 feet away from her are reduced to half their current hit points, while creatures within dude, yep, got it. You got it, Vaughn. Big weird idea. Becomes a revenant for a number of days. Yep, that's it. You busted it out. Because it's easy. Like, there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like, you know, if a ghost kills you, or like a white kills you, you turn into a shadow or a specter or whatever it is, right? Like, it's easy to reference another monster. That's exactly right. Yeah, because then their like body is like deteriorating, so they can briefly become a revenant. They don't possess you, I don't think. I think they get their own old body back, but that's precisely how to do it. Yep, beautiful. While creatures within 30 feet of her are dropped to 0 hit points. Oh yeah, what if we did it this way? What if we said creatures more than 30 feet away from her take 10, 3d6 psychic damage. Yeah. While creatures within 30 feet of her are dropped to 0 hit point. Or dropped to 0 hit points. So like there is no like success thing. Right. I just think it's weird that it's only 30 feet. Like, it's a scream, right? It's this big. It's like the whole point of it is that it's super, super, super loud. It does make it like I think it actually balances okay because we are extending its reach, but then we're also saying like if you succeed, there's no negative consequence. So I actually don't think it makes it that much more powerful. So let's go and say that a Banshee that reduces a humanoid to 0 charisma becomes a Revenant for 24 hours. I like that. You could do 1d4 days too. 1d4 days. Yeah, let's do that. Good idea, Vaughn. That was an excellent idea. Action. Sometimes the biggest, weirdest ideas are the best. Okay, I think that's the mechanics on our new Banshee. Medium undead, chaotic evil, AC 12, all that stuff. Detect life is the same. Incorporeal movement is the same. Horrifying visage. A creature that can see the Banshee's face starts to turn within 30 feet of the Banshee. The Banshee can force it to make a DC 13 Wisdom saving throw if the Banshee isn't incapacitated. On a failure, the target ages 1d4 times 5 years. A creature cannot die of old age from this effect, but the effect can only be reversed with a greater restoration spell cast in the 24 hours of it occurring. Unless surprised, a creature can avert its eyes to avoid the saving throw at the start of its turn. If the creature does so, it can't see the Banshee until the start of its next turn when it can avert its eyes again. If the creature looks at the Banshee in the meantime, it must immediately make the save. Self-image. If the Banshee looks at its own image, a painting, a sketch, or a sculpture, it must make a DC 13 Wisdom saving throw. On a failure, the Banshee loses its resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons and gains ability rating damage. We wanted to change that to self-loathing. Although I can't decide if I like... I think self is like a weird attachment. I almost want to call it loathing. And then I want to say, like, look at an image of itself in life. Because, like, you know, if you just drew a painting of the Banshee, that's not the same thing. It's got to be an image of itself in life. That's an ability. Loathing. Get rid of self-image. Okay, cool. Avant says, I like the ability to score drained number of days, but that's really to taste. Oh, yeah, I didn't even put that. Yep. That's right. Days, I kind of think it's a short rest thing, right? That, like, you know, your madness doesn't recover for 1d10 hours or whatever, but I want to give it the shadow thing where you get it back, because, like, that's one of the worst feelings in the world, is losing your ability scores and not understanding how long it takes. So let's put it in as a long rest or whatever. But yes, that's an excellent point. I forgot to put that in. Well, we could say long rest, though. Otherwise, the reduction lasts until this reduction lasts until ooh, that's interesting, Vaughn. Yeah, like an audio thing. I think that could be a DM fiat thing. Lasts until the target finishes a short or a long rest. I think you could probably, I'm not going to put it in the stat block, but I think you could even specifically, like, I want to keep it images because that's very Dorian Gray, right? But I think I could absolutely see a scenario where, like, you know, someone who knew the Banshee in life, just like describing them, you know, like the idea of finding like the Banshee's like lost lover or whatever and talking about, you know, like a graphic enough description of them and like their beauty, I think could also potentially work, right? Like, I think that would be up to the dungeon master. I like in the text keeping it to be just yeah, I love that. I think that's really cool. Giving it just images, but I think you could absolutely do like sound, you know, it's like a homebrew thing for sure. Can I do that? Does that make it look better? No, let's keep it the way it is. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, that's the mechanics for the Banshee. I might call it there, y'all, because like I can write this lore, but I feel like it's we've talked about the lore, we understand the lore, and I don't think it's very like exciting to watch me write it out. You know, I want to proof it and stuff like that. And I think keeping the stream a little shorter maybe isn't the end of the world if I'm trying to like draw in new viewers. Excellent. Yeah, that's the Banshee. Very nice, everybody. I should be free next Thursday. I might move the time around. I'm gonna do a poll of my patrons, I think, to see if there's a time that would be more preferable for them. But I was surprised at the turnout for like a no notice stream. 4 or 5 people came and hung out and were active in chat. That was awesome. Yeah. So then, if we're going to do this again next week, which I hope, Next week, we will be talking about the Basilisk and redesigning the Basilisk. If you are a patron, that episode should be going live tomorrow on Patreon. I didn't do an early release of the Banshee, mainly because I forgot. But going forward, Monster of the Week, the podcast that you can check out on the link directly above, is a weekly podcast that goes out on Sundays for the general public, but Fridays for patrons of ProDM's Patreon. So we'll be back to talk about the Basilisk and ways we can redesign it. We might end up doing a couple different monsters. But while I'm talking about the Patreon, let me say this. If you are a patron, you should have access to this monster starting on Sunday. I will get the lore written and get it uploaded onto the Daily Bestiary. I'm currently in the process of compiling a big, huge, like, bonus content archive. I don't know what to call it yet. I think maybe like the Trove or something. That has all the things that I've made in the past couple of years for patrons. That's adventures, that's maps, that's monsters, that's subclasses, all of that stuff. I want to make available to all of our patrons in an easily accessible way. But this is one of the things that you get as a perk of the Patreon is you can download this stat block, you can get access to it, and all of that goodness. So yeah, please check out our Patreon. There should be a link below in the description to not only the Patreon, but also our Twitter and our Discord. And I think that's it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, as the overlay suggests, please like and subscribe to the video. It goes a long way towards increasing eyes on the content that I make. You can find me online at the places below. You can also visit my website at pro-dm.net because, yes, as the name implies, I am a professional dungeon master, which means that I run adventures for people for money, if you believe it or not. You can hire me to run a game for you if you'd like, and I can maybe even throw my new custom Banshee if you want to play test whether or not we've just made something way too powerful to fight. So check me out there on pro-dm.net, pro-dm.net for all the information that you need there. But I think that is going to wrap it up for our first Monster Workshop. Thanks so much for coming, everybody. We'll be back next week with another one, but I will also probably be here on Sunday doing a world building stream for my upcoming Dwarven campaign. I'll talk more about it on Sunday, but we had a very exciting session in my home game last week. The players are... it's a different game. It's obviously set in the same world, but they finally arrived in Coom, which is like Coom sort of like at its height, which is crazy because I've been doing so much work on it to actually like have to sit down and like describe it to people and say words like True Throne to them and describe what True Throne looks like was a surreal experience. So if you're a fan of the world building stream, yeah, come check it out. We might talk about that campaign. We might just do some regular stuff. I'm not sure, but it was cool. I'm excited to actually get to run the real campaign there sooner rather than later. But anyway, all that out of the way. Thank you for coming, and I hope that you have a good rest of your week. I'll hopefully see you this weekend. Thanks for coming, everybody. I will talk to you soon. Until next time, happy adventuring. I was like, what is my sign off catchphrase? I couldn't even remember. Ridiculous.